Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep. Welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin the discussion by first looking at the articles we are going to discuss from today's newspaper. I have chosen 7 important articles from the Delhi edition of the Hindu. We have 3 articles for a detailed discussion, which is very important for our mains and as well as the prelims exam. And we have 4 more articles that are specifically relevant for the prelims examination. So let's carry out a detailed analysis of all these articles so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking the initiative, do support us by pressing the like button, do subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share these videos with other aspirants as well. And also join our Telegram channel because after the session ends, we'll have a quiz on these topics. So you can revise these articles. So the link for the Telegram channel also is provided in the description box below. So with this, let's begin with today's discussion of the Hindu newspaper by looking at this important editorial from page number 8. This editorial deals with the office of governor, the gubernatorial office of governor, the role and functions of the governor and how it often triggers a controversy with the state governments. I'm sure you would have heard about the long-standing issues between the office of the governor and state governments, especially the states that are ruled by opposition parties. There is often an accusation that the governor functions as an agent of the center. Usually, the appointments to the office of the governor happens to be a political appointment, which is made by the central government. So it's often alleged that the governors, they function as agents of the ruling party at the center. They often disrupt and interrupt the functioning of elected state governments, which poses a direct threat to federalism and center-state relations in the country. So in this regard, there is a particular issue which has been making the news over the last several months, especially in opposition-ruled states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, also in Telangana, and even in Chhattisgarh, West Bengal and Punjab. These issues have been coming up quite frequently. And Tamil Nadu and Kerala and even Telangana, they have taken the issue to the Supreme Court as well, asking for directions to curtail the powers and the conduct of the governor, as allegedly the governors in these states have been interfering with the decision-making powers, the law-making powers of the elected state governments. The allegation by the states is that this undermines their constitutional authority. This has happened over several issues, not just with regard to one particular role or function of the governor, but over several roles and functions carried out by the governor. There has been this standoff that has come up between state governments ruled by the opposition parties and the office of the governor. So this highlights the problem of making political appointments into the Raj Bhavan, right, into the office of the governor, which has often led to these allegations that elected governments are being disrupted, state legislatures are being disrupted by the ruling party at the center by allegedly misusing the office of the governor. So let's carry out a more detailed discussion of this topic. Let's understand what is the issue currently. Let's look at the different issues brought up by Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Telangana and other state governments. Let's look at the constitutional provisions as well, which accord certain powers to the office of the governor. Let's look at some important recommendations of various commissions and the Supreme Court regarding these issues. And finally, we'll discuss a way forward as well. Now, if you look at the current issue which has been hitting the headlines, Tamil Nadu and Kerala have alleged that the governor of the respective states has not been providing assent to the bills that have been passed by the state legislature. As you know, state legislatures, which are elected bodies, they have complete powers under the constitution to bring out the laws to provide for governance and welfare in the concerned state. But this law-making power of the elected legislature and the elected government is allegedly being disrupted by governors not giving assent to the bill which has already been passed by the state legislature. So Tamil Nadu had approached the Supreme Court regarding this matter. For example, Tamil Nadu's governor R.N. Ravi has triggered a major controversy in Tamil Nadu by repeatedly holding back assent to a bill that seeks to exempt Tamil Nadu from the NEET examination system. Tamil Nadu doesn't want to adopt the national eligibility cum entrance test as far as medical education in the country is concerned. And with regard to this, Tamil Nadu has brought out a law which has been passed by the legislature, the state legislature. It is pending the assent of the governor to become a law. But R.N. Ravi, the governor of Tamil Nadu, has held on to the assent for several months, and after considerable delay has referred the matter to the president for further consideration. So this inordinate delay in granting assent directly compromises the authority of the state government and the state legislature, which are elected bodies. This hits at the very foundation of federalism and center-state relations in the country, which goes against constitutional mandate. Tamil Nadu has also alleged that the governor is not approving other decisions of the state government, regular policy-making decisions. For example, the Tamil Nadu government had decided to grant remission to certain convicts as part of the pardoning powers of the state and the office of the governor. In this regard as well, the governor has held on to the decision. Then with regard to giving sanction for prosecuting few former ministers of previous governments on allegations of corruption, right? There is a requirement for a approval to come from the office of the governor, which has been held back. Then more importantly, with regard to the appointments to the state public service commissions, while appointing the chairman and the members of the state public service commissions, this is the authority of the Council of Ministers at the state level, headed by the Chief Minister. They will recommend a list of names which has to be appointed by the governor. The governor has no discretionary powers here. The governor is in fact bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers according to the Indian Constitution. Right? But despite this, the governor is holding on to some of these approvals and decisions, which is affecting the policy making and decision making powers of the elected state government. Similar concerns have been raised by Kerala as well. The Kerala state government has alleged that the Kerala state governor has not been granting assent to two important bills that have been passed by the Kerala state legislature. One has to do with the amendment to Lokayukta bill, and the other has to do with amendment to the Kerala University bill. These important pieces of legislation have been held up even after being passed by the state legislature because the governor has not granted the assent. So similar issues have propped up in Telangana, in Chhattisgarh, Punjab and West Bengal as well. And this is not a new issue. This has persisted from many decades. There has always been an allegation, a controversy that the gubernatorial office of the governor is misused by the ruling party at the center to interfere in opposition-ruled states. These concerns have existed even with regard to emergency powers, with regard to imposing president's rule under Article 356, with regard to declaring that the constitutional machinery of the state has failed under Article 365, following which the governor can recommend to the president for the invocation of president's rule or state emergency in the state, which leads to the dismissal of the Council of Ministers and the state legislature. Even with regard to these powers as well, these emergency powers as well, there has been an allegation that ruling parties at center have misused the office of the governor to even topple elected governments and legislatures. Now, this is where we need to understand that the governor, the office of the governor as envisioned by our constitution makers, is supposed to be a link in our federal setup. The office of the governor is supposed to be a vital link between the center and the state, providing for a harmonious equation and a relationship between the central government and the state governments. The office was supposed to promote the spirit of federalism, to protect the jurisdiction of the center and the state as listed out under Schedule 7 of the Indian Constitution. Right, the state has been given its own jurisdiction through state subjects and concurrent subjects. The center has its own jurisdiction through union subjects and the concurrent subjects. Right, so with regard to administration in the country at the state level, the office of the governor was supposed to play this key role as a link between the center and the state, providing for smooth functioning and harmonious relations between the two organs. But however, since the appointment of governor is always a political appointment, governors have often displayed a political bias in their functioning. If not everyone, at least majority of the governors that we have seen, right, have displayed a political bias which seems to favor the ruling party at the center. This has been a persistent problem and a concern that has existed as far as Indian polity is concerned. There have been very serious allegations in the past as well, as I told you, regarding the imposition of president's rule, where elected governments have been toppled. And when there is a hung assembly following elections, where the governor enjoys a few discretionary powers in appointing the chief minister, even here, a bias has been alleged. When it comes to choosing the chief minister, right, in inviting the leader of a certain party to claim majority during a hung assembly, even in such situations, political bias has been reflected in the functioning of the office of the governor. Even when no confidence motions are moved against the state government, when voting is held on the floor of the house, during these critical votes as well, it's been alleged that the office of the governor has behaved in a biased manner by giving up political neutrality. The office of the governor is supposed to be a politically neutral office. The governor should not be displaying any political ambitions, should be seen as a neutral, unbiased, fair official, a constitutional official, right? Because it is a constitutional office. But every now and then these allegations have existed, and this has increased over a period of time. Now, if you look at the powers of the governor with regard to legislation, with regard to lawmaking, with regard to bills that are passed by state assemblies, if you see what the Constitution says, you have Article 200 of the Constitution that provides a certain degree of power to the governor regarding legislation, regarding lawmaking. According to Article 200, the governor has the authority to either grant assent to the bill, then the bill becomes a law, or the governor can withhold assent as well if the governor feels that the bill being adopted by the state assembly is in contravention to the powers of the High Court, or if it is seen to be contradictory to the central laws, or if it is seen to be against national interests. Under such circumstances, the governor can exercise a discretionary power to either grant assent or withhold their assent, or even reserve the bill and push it for the consideration of the President of India. Is that clear? Once it is referred to the President for further consideration, then Article 201 kicks into effect, where the President can either grant assent or withhold assent or send the bill back, asking the governor to refer it back to the Legislative Assembly. Now here the governor, of course, has the power to return a bill. If it's not a money bill, any bill other than a money bill can be returned back to the House for a reconsideration. Now if the House sends back the bill in the same format without any changes, without any amendments, then the governor cannot withhold assent. The Constitution is very clear about this. The governor shall not withhold assent if the same bill is passed again by the assembly, by the state assembly, by the state legislature. Is that clear? But however, the Constitution doesn't say anything about withholding assent. The governor can inordinately withhold assent, leading to inordinate delays. There is no time period mentioned in the Constitution before which the governor has to make a decision. See, ideally either the governor has to give assent or withhold it for a short period of time, deliberate upon it and then refer the bill for the consideration of the President, or send it back for reconsideration of the House, and if it comes back, then he or she will be bound to give assent. That should be the normal process. But the Constitution makers did not envision a scenario where governors will unreasonably hold up their assent. they would simply sit on the bill, withholding assent. They would neither refer it to the president nor grant assent. They would just withhold assent because this is a shortcoming in the constitution itself. This is something that was not contemplated by the constitution makers. They didn't imagine a governor behaving politically or holding back assent for indefinite periods of time. Now this provision, or rather this shortcoming that exists here, has often been misused by various governors to withhold assent for indefinite periods of time. That is why there is a suggestion, a recommendation that the constitution needs to provide for a definite time period, a time limit. Or at least the Supreme Court should step in and set a reasonable time frame for decision making by governors with regard to granting assent to bills passed by the state assembly, by the state legislature. Even previous commissions that have looked into the issue, like the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, the second ARC, then even the Justice Punchi Commission that dealt with center-state relations, and few Supreme Court rulings as well. They've all examined the issue. They all agree that there can't be such inordinate delays because that would directly undermine the lawmaking powers of an elected government at the state level. It undercuts the very principle of federalism and allows the center to directly interfere with the jurisdiction of the state. But despite all these previous recommendations, there is no set time frame that exists as of now, which is often misused by governors to hold on their assent, to withhold the assent for indefinite periods. And they won't even refer it to the president's consideration, or they don't grant assent as well. They'll simply sit on the bill without giving assent. And this leads to a complete logjam in the state lawmaking domain. As far as state legislature is concerned, the lawmaking business hits a dead end, a stalemate, by withholding these important pieces of legislation. While this is one important concern, the other concern has to do with the universities, the public universities established through laws passed by the state. Because with regard to universities as well, the governor has a role to play. The governor happens to be a ex officio chancellor of some of the public universities. This is not a constitutional provision, but however, when public universities are set up by passing a law, usually in the state assembly, right? The founding statute, the law which provides for the establishment of the university, has often provided for the governor to be the chancellor of the university. This has been a normal practice, like a convention in the country. But governors of late are unwilling to give up these powers if the state is trying to set up a university where the governor will not be the chancellor. Or let's say the state is trying to amend the law related to the university to ensure the governor will not interfere with the appointment of vice chancellors and the administration and governance of the university. Let's say the state, right, the state government and the legislature, they want to leave out the governor or at least limit the powers of the governor as the chancellor so that the states can completely look after the appointments and the administration of the university. If such bills are brought up, even then, governors are not providing assent. They are withholding assent because this is a conflict of interest, right? They don't want to give up the power of being a chancellor. They delay assent, withhold assent to any such bill. And we see this happening in Kerala currently. Kerala has passed the Kerala Public University Amendment Bill, where it is curbing the powers of the governor and it wants to ensure that state government has more authority over appointments and administration. It wants to appoint its own vice chancellors, look after the governance of the university, right? And that is a mandate of the state. That is the domain of the state. So for that, amendment bill has been brought out to curb the chancellor powers of the governor. But the governor, who doesn't like to give away these powers, has withheld assent for an indefinite period, thus compromising the lawmaking powers of the state legislature. In fact, in this regard, if you look at the Justice M.M. Punchi Commission on Center-State Relations, the commission had recommended that there should be a prohibition on governors from being appointed as chancellors of universities. The commission had recommended that this is an unnecessary burden on the office of the governor. This was usually an honorary position which was being given to the to the highest level of office at the state level, which is the office of the governor, right? But quite often, this has led to clashes between the office of the governor and the state government with regard to appointments and administration at the university. So the Punchi Commission had recommended that governor's office should not be overburdened with the function of the chancellor of a university. But if states make an attempt to limit the role of the governor, governors don't grant their approval to such bills. They withhold assent for indefinite periods, which directly undermines the lawmaking powers of the state. The same issue has been noticed with regard to pardoning powers of the governor as well. Just like the President of India has a set of pardoning powers, the governor also has a set of pardoning powers. But of course, it's not a discretionary power of the governor. Here, the governor is clearly bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, headed by the Chief Minister of the state. Now, this is provided under Article 161 of the Constitution. Under Article 161, the governor has the power to grant pardons, reprieves, remissions, commute sentences, etc. But the Supreme Court has made this very clear that this is not a discretionary power of the governor. The governor can't decide on his own. He or she, they are bound by the advice of the state government, advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister. Now in Tamil Nadu, the state government wants to commute sentences of few convicts. That's a legitimate constitutional lawmaking power of the state. But the governor is exercising a discretionary power which has not been provided and withholding approvals, thereby delaying policy making at the state level. Is that clear? Now if you look at Article 163, it clearly provides for the governor being driven by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister. In most of the functions, right, governor does not have discretionary powers. The governor can't take decisions the way he or she wants. In most cases, the discretionary powers of the governor is limited, as the governor is largely bound, very strictly bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. There are very few cases where the governor enjoys a set of discretionary powers. For example, in appointing a chief minister when no party has a clear majority, that is, when there is a hung assembly, as I was mentioning, in inviting the leader of the largest party to stake claim to form the government, that is where the governor has a certain degree of discretion. When no confidence motions are moved and voting has to take place on the floor of the house, right? This is where the governor has an element of discretion. When there is a failure of constitutional machinery in the state, if the administration of the state cannot be carried out as per the constitutional provisions, right? The governor can write a report to the President of India recommending the imposition of President's rule under Article 356, and this is a discretionary power. So these are some of the discretionary powers vested with the governor by the Constitution, but not the rest, right? With regard to Article 200, Article 161, the role of governor as a chancellor of university, right? These are not discretionary powers. Here the governor is supposed to be bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. But governors are working in the legal grey area, the constitutional grey area that exists, the shortcomings that exist, and they're seen to be disrupting the lawmaking powers, the policy making powers of the state government and the state legislature. So that is the reason why Tamil Nadu and Kerala have approached the court seeking a remedy. They want the discretionary powers and the other powers of the governor to be curbed or restricted, or at least a time period to be set within which the governor has to provide assent to the bills. So that is why even Telangana had approached the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had said that governors cannot sit indefinitely on bills without giving assent. Within a reasonable time period, assent has to be provided, or it should be referred to the President for consideration. Or at least it should be sent back to the House for reconsideration, and if the bill comes back, then the governor is bound to approve it. The governor would be bound to give assent. But Supreme Court has not ventured into this area where it would give out a direction as such, as it doesn't want to step into the domain of the legislature and the executive, right? So this is where the controversy comes up, and the way forward would be to ensure that the governors don't breach their constitutional mandate. There is a thin line between what is constitutionally valid and what is not, right? There is a certain gray area in certain cases. As I told you, there are few shortcomings. So this is where governors have to know that their role is not a political role. They need to know that they head the executive at the state level. They perform a critical constitutional role as a link between the center and the state. They should provide for harmonious functioning of center-state relations rather than disrupting them. The center also should ensure that political appointments are limited, and even if political appointments are made, right, the governor should be neutral and apolitical once they're appointed as the governor, right? So there has to be a certain time limit, especially with regard to granting assent, especially when it comes to withholding assent to a bill, right? There has to be a certain reasonable time frame, or else it directly compromises the lawmaking powers of the elected government. So this is what you should be aware of as far as the office of the governor is concerned and the controversy surrounding it is concerned. Now moving on, we have another important editorial today on page number 8 that deals with the menace of fake news and how governments are trying to tackle the menace of fake news. So it's an important topic under internal security, under GS paper 3, and it's also an important topic with regard to polity. So let's look at the context. Let's understand why fake news is a threat, what types of fake news exist, and what governments are doing and why that has created a controversy of its own. Now, as you know, fake news is essentially false information, which is not factual, which is factually incorrect. Now, fake news can either be misinformation or it can be disinformation. Misinformation is where there is no deliberate intent to deceive or harm. This is largely occurring due to ignorance, or it could be done by miscreants who are spreading false information, right? In some cases, it could be miscreants who are doing it, maybe to create sensation, to attract more views, right? By providing clickbait thumbnails or clickbait headlines, etc. Or even satire, parody, and hoax articles, right? They constitute misinformation. There is no specific intent to harm someone or deceive someone or to target someone. But factually incorrect information which is being spread out, that is misinformation, right? Where the audience who are reading these articles, watching these videos, they are being misinformed. They are being informed about the wrong facts. So such information that usually spreads on media platforms is misinformation. This can spread even on your traditional media platforms like television, radio, newspapers, print, magazines, etc. But however, on social media, the menace is much more serious given the reach and impact of social media. Right? Today, social media platforms, be it YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, they have enormous reach, instantaneous reach, where every mobile phone user with an internet connection can become a content creator, right? Where people can write articles, upload videos, and if they are not checking facts, and if they are spreading out wrong information, that becomes fake news. It becomes a type of misinformation, where the audience is being misinformed, right? And given the scale and reach of social media, the impact is much more severe, and it could actually lead to real world problems, including security problems. Because fake news can be used to target certain individuals, organizations, or governments. It could be used to trigger violence in the society. It could be used to increase polarization on social lines, like communal polarization between two communities, two religions, to drive ethnic fault lines, to trigger mob violence, unrest, even leading to civil wars and rebellions against the government. Right? It could even lead to disruption of democratic elections. So there are many such threats present from the misuse of social media where fake news is circulated, and when it is done without an intention to deceive or target, we call it misinformation. But if it is deliberately designed to deceive and target and to discredit someone, it is called disinformation, where there is a specific intent to deceive the audience. There is a propaganda involved, maybe a religious propaganda, political propaganda to favor a certain party, to favor a certain community or an organization, right? Where there is an attempt made to discredit the opposition leaders or certain political elements or certain other communities, right? As part of a well-planned propaganda campaign, which is always with a political intention, if there is a specific design to discredit someone, to harm someone, to deceive the audience, right? And to manipulate public opinion, then that becomes disinformation. Such fake news gets classified as disinformation. So there is a subtle difference between misinformation and disinformation. So these are the types of fake news that spreads and that represents the misuse of social media platforms. So as I told you, this represents a real threat. It could increase social divisions, it could increase communal polarization, ethnic divisions, caste-based divisions in the society. It could enable miscreants to conduct their criminal activities as well, including organized crime. It could lead to mob unrest, mob violence at the ground level, triggering large-scale unrest or even leading disaffection against the state, promoting civil wars and rebellions against the state, or manipulating the choice of the voters, where the electoral process, the democratic electoral process can be disrupted. Free and fair elections can be disrupted, right? So the misuse of social media indeed represents a grave risk in today's world. We have seen governments being toppled, democratic elections being disrupted, violence being triggered in countries around the world. So to tackle the menace of fake news, the central government and the state government are coming out with certain regulatory measures and policies. Now in this regard, the government of India, the central government, had notified the IT rules in 2021 in order to regulate social media and even OTT platforms, digital media, etc. IT rules of 2021 were notified, and this has been recently amended in 2023. Through these IT rules, the central government has given itself a lot of powers, especially the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology gets tremendous regulatory powers over social media intermediaries. Several obligations have been placed on social media firms to tackle the menace of fake news, right? If they don't follow these regulatory provisions, they will no longer enjoy the legal immunity which is provided to the intermediaries under the IT Act. Under the IT Act of 2000, social media companies, they enjoy a certain degree of legal immunity for third-party content which is hosted on their platforms, which means the social media companies can't be held liable, they can't be prosecutable, right? They can't be prosecuted for the content someone else is posting on their platform. For that, a certain degree of immunity is provided under the IT Act. But through the IT rules, this immunity can be taken away if the social media companies don't follow the IT rules, if they don't work with the government to tackle fake news and other aspects of misuse of social media. Now recently this was amended, which has given more authority to the center to regulate social media, and the Ministry of Electronics and IT can even appoint a fact-checking unit. Reports indicate that most likely the PIB, the Press Information Bureau, would be given authority to check fake news. It would act as a fact-checking unit, and it would direct social media companies by flagging any fake news which is factually incorrect, which could be a case of misinformation or disinformation. And if such fake news is flagged by the fact-checking unit, according to IT rules, the social media companies, they have to take down such content. They have to mandatorily take down the content. They will not get any prior notice. There is no judicial recourse available to them, right? They have to comply with the orders once the government flags a particular news item or information as fake, right? If it is flagged by the fact-checking unit, which is being set up under the IT rules, it will be mandatorily taken down by social media companies. If they don't do it, they'll be in breach of the IT rules, which means the legal immunity will go away. The social media companies will be liable. They can be prosecuted. Criminal prosecution can be pressed against them if they don't follow the rules that have been mandated. Now, similar set of fact-checking units are being set up by the state governments as well. That's why the topic is in news. Recently, the state government of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka both have established, they have brought out a set of policies to establish state-level fact-checking units to check what information is factual and what is not. And this is where the problem arises. This is where the controversy arises. Now, if the government itself is becoming the judge, jury, and the prosecutor, if the government itself is deciding what is factual, what is not, then this could be very, very problematic, because most often this tremendous power could be misused by the ruling parties at the central government, also at the state level, to target political criticism, to target their critics, their opponents, or to target journalists, to target media outlets, social activists, etc. This could be a direct violation of your constitutional right to free speech and expression and the right to free press, which is guaranteed under Article 19 of the Constitution. See, criticizing the government is a democratic right, be it for the journalist, the media, or a common citizen, right? Be it for activists, students, or opposition parties, political leaders and political parties. It is a democratic right, a birthright in a democratic nation to criticize the government. This is the very bedrock of a democracy. Now, if the government flags any criticism as fake news, right? And if companies are mandated to take down such content, isn't that a direct breach of freedom of speech and expression and freedom of press, which is a constitutional right under Article 19? Criticism of the government is not under reasonable restrictions. Of course, this is not an absolute right. This right is under few restrictions. There are reasonable restrictions. But criticizing a government is not one of the restrictions. You have every right to criticize the government. Now, tomorrow, if the fact-checking units are set up by the government, if it comprises entirely of government officials, this is clearly a case of vested interest, a conflict of interest. Correct? Why would the ruling party encourage any criticism against itself? It will direct the officials. The ruling party will direct the officials to declare such criticism as false news through their fact-checking units. And since there is no other legal recourse available, the companies will be forced to take down the content. Be it a news platform, a social media platform, they will have to mandatorily take down such content, or else they'll be liable for criminal prosecution. Now, this is where the problem comes up, a serious challenge comes up to the constitutional right guaranteed under Article 19. Understood? So that is the concern being raised by the editorial. The government itself can't give these powers without any checks and balances. The government can't be the adjudicator of what is factual news and what is not. Of course, government has to play a role. It has to come out with a policy, but government alone cannot control this regulatory environment. There should be an involvement of independent bodies. The fact-checking unit is very much needed, but it should be an independent body. It shouldn't be a government body controlled entirely by the government. Then ruling parties will have a direct incentive to curb any criticism of the government, and that stifles freedom of speech and expression and the right to free press. So what can be done? How do we address this issue? If fake news is a menace, then how do governments deal with it? What's the way forward? For example, the scope and powers and composition of the fact-checking unit should be very transparent and very clearly specified by the government. Let the government set up a fact-checking unit. Nothing wrong with that. But the composition has to be fair. There should be representation for all the stakeholders. It can't be a government-dominated body. Like as reports are indicating, Press Information Bureau at the central government can't be the fact-checking unit because PIB is a government entity, right? That is where the fear exists. The government will stifle criticism. Instead, the fact-checking unit should have a more broad, inclusive representation in its composition. It should provide representation for journalists, media, other stakeholders as well. Maybe a judicial member can be brought in, a retired judge, to head the fact-checking unit to bring some transparency and independence. Journalists and media organizations can be given representation, right? So the government alone cannot maintain its sole monopoly over this domain. Even the scope, the powers of such a fact-checking unit should be transparently specified. Right now it has not been done, neither by the central government nor by the governments of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. It's ideal that tackling fake news and misinformation if it is left to independent bodies. That is the ideal way, right? Ideally, this aspect of dealing with fake news should be left to independent bodies that comprises of the civil society, the media organizations, right? You have Editors Guild, there are media organizations at the industry level, right? So they would be more appropriate to regulate misinformation and fake news. And even if the government seeks to regulate this area, the fact-checking units should have greater representation. It can't be dominated, controlled entirely by the government. That's where the fear of getting this platform getting misused by the ruling party arises. And any such process should follow the principles of natural justice, meaning a prior notice should be given before ordering the company to take down the content. There should be a right to appeal, right? The content creator should appeal, should have a right to appeal, challenging the flag that has been raised by the fact-checking unit. You need to have an option to counter the claims of the government. If the government is saying something is fake news, how can you believe that? There should be an option to appeal against it. And there should be judicial oversight, an option to seek judicial remedy, right? So that is the process to be followed. We already have several independent fact checkers who are doing this job, right? There are civil society activists, media organizations that have these independent fact-checking bodies which are tackling the menace of fake news and misinformation. The government needs to work with them. Even if the government is setting up a fact-checking unit, the representation is the concern. It can't be a government-dominated body. There should be representation for journalists and other stakeholders to ensure transparency. The powers have to be limited. There should be checks and balances, and the principles of natural justice has to be followed. That is when the government can strike a balance between tackling fake news while protecting the constitutional right under Article 19. Right? That balance has to be struck. So that is what the editorial is highlighting. Now coming to the next column on page number 8, the writer talks about the Indian Institute of Technology, or IIT, which has been the jewel crown of India's higher education. I'm sure all of you know how reputed IITs are in India. But today we are seeing a rapid expansion of IIT campuses and infrastructure. Several new IITs have been set up, right? They are even setting up foreign campus as part of India's soft power diplomacy. For several decades, India had only few IITs. They were considered as elite institutions. Thousands and thousands of students would compete in highly competitive exams to make it to the list. The best professors would be brought in to teach. The best possible infrastructure in the country would be provided to aid research and better pedagogy. So no wonder IITs emerged. The initial IITs, they emerged as centers of excellence. They became one of the most elite institutions of higher education in the country as far as engineering, science and technology was concerned. It's usually these IITs which rank in the global list of top universities as well. Right? These are the only ones which make the cut, along with the Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru. So IITs have had a tremendous track record, a great reputation. They have produced various industry leaders, top scientists, researchers, right? Not just in India, today they are contributing around the world, right? IIT graduates, they have moved around the world. They hold key positions in several top companies, tech companies. Just look at the big tech firms, right? Most of the leadership positions are occupied by IIT alumni. So the IITs have indeed made an incredible contribution to India and the world, to the domain of technology itself and engineering and the STEM domain. But however, there is a concern the writer is pointing out. Recently, the government has gone for a very swift expansion of IITs. And this is raising concerns about the quality of education that will be offered through IITs. Several new IITs have been opened up across the country, that too in several remote areas. Several new IIT campuses which have come up in the country, they have come up in remote areas or in tier 2, tier 3 cities. Now this policy of the government of India has both advantages and disadvantages. Along with that, IITs are going abroad. 2 new IIT campuses are coming up in foreign locations as part of India's soft power diplomacy to leverage education in our diplomacy. For example, IIT Madras has set up its first foreign campus at Zanzibar, which is a small, beautiful island that belongs to Tanzania in East Africa. Because in East Africa, we have a very strong Indian diaspora from Kenya to Ethiopia to Tanzania, even Zanzibar. In the island of Zanzibar, there's a very strong Indian community, right? From centuries, Indian traders, especially from Gujarat and southern parts of India, they have moved to Eastern Africa, and there is a historical link that exists. So there is a very strong diaspora link between India and East Africa. And also to help these countries in providing quality higher education, India has expanded the IIT to foreign shores as well. And IIT Madras has opened its first foreign campus at Zanzibar in Tanzania. Similarly, IIT Delhi. These two are some of the most reputed IITs in the country. They are part of the older batch of IITs. IIT Delhi has set up its first foreign campus in the United Arab Emirates. As you know, West Asia is another major region for Indian diaspora. Across West Asian countries, we have more than 10 million Indians, right? Especially in the UAE, you have close to 3.5 million Indians. So in the UAE, IIT Delhi is setting up its first foreign campus to use education, higher education as a soft power tool to give a diplomatic push as well. Now, this policy is being criticized by the writer. He's raising few valid concerns. He's saying that such a rampant expansion without enough thought about the investments needed, the professors needed, the admission process, the quality of education, the infrastructure, right? All of this could get compromised if we carried out a hurried expansion. Now see, several new IITs have come up across the length and breadth of India. Today, I think we have around 23 IITs in the country, which is a very significant expansion. But majority of them are struggling with lack of funds, poor facilities and poor infrastructure. And see, the bread and butter of any institution, any educational institution is the teacher, right? The professors. Several new IITs are unable to attract the right talent. They are unable to attract good professors because they don't have the money to pay them. They're not able to match the international standards to attract good talent. And usually professors and even students will be hesitant to move to some remote tier 2, tier 3 cities. However, the advantage here is that, I'll tell you the advantage as well. The advantage of opening campuses in smaller cities is that it makes education more accessible, right? For several students for whom IIT may just be a dream, a pipe dream, for them IITs become more accessible with more vacancies, more seats available, closer to their hometown. So more students will be able to access quality higher education. That is a positive aspect, that's an advantage. But the drawback is that if the government doesn't provide enough investments, funds, if it is not able to attract the right talent, if it's not able to create the right facilities, infrastructure, the research and development facilities needed, the quality of education, learning gets compromised. It will affect the brand image of the IITs. In fact, today, believe it or not, within IITs, a segregation has emerged. You ask any student, right? I'm sure many of you know about this. Students always prefer the old IITs, which had built up their global reputation. Most of them don't prefer the new IITs. So there is a categorization which has happened. Ideally, this shouldn't be happening. IITs across the country should be able to provide the same quality of education, the same research facilities, the same internships, the same campus placement offers. But that is not happening, right? The new IITs are still struggling with various administrative issues, governance related issues, funding related issues, creating this distinction. This affects the overall brand image of the IITs itself. It could compromise higher education. And when we haven't set things right within the country, what's the point of going abroad, right? Even the top Western universities, if you look at the top universities from Europe, from United States, from Australia, even they have struggled to set up foreign campuses. Because it's not easy to get the right talent, to set up the right infrastructure, to attract the right students. It's not going to be an easy task. It's a long-term process. So when the top universities of the world have struggled with foreign campuses, IITs ideally should have been kept limited to India. We should have focused on improving the existing IITs and providing better funds and infrastructure to them. It's good to expand IITs, good to provide quality higher education in other remote tier 2, tier 3 cities as well. But the required funds have to be given. Without paying right salaries, no good teacher will come and join the institute. Right? You can't ensure the right infrastructure, research facilities are provided. You can't attract good companies to tie up with these institutions. So these are the core problems which need to be addressed. According to the writer, this is a crisis facing the IITs. The unplanned, rampant expansion which has happened across India and also abroad is affecting the very brand image and the quality of education being offered through IITs. So that is a major concern that the writer is raising. He's saying that the government has overcommitted. Before setting things right with regard to existing IIT campuses, the expansion which has happened, right, has overburdened the very institution itself, leading to a direct impact on learning outcomes. Because the writer points out that even though admissions have gone up due to new IITs being opened, there are several vacancies left. In such a highly competitive field, you can't have so many vacancies. You look at undergraduate seats, PG seats and even PhD seats, there are hundreds of vacancies left. Students are not preferring them because they don't prefer to join the new IITs. Most of them still prefer the old IITs due to better quality of professors, better research opportunities. So this is the problem that needs to be solved in our higher education, according to the writer. So this completes my detailed discussion of all the big articles in today's newspaper. Now we proceed to the prelim section. We take a quick look at the smaller articles in today's newspaper. On page number 6, we have an article referring to the National Dam Safety Authority. Remember yesterday, we spoke about the Kaleshwaram irrigation project in Telangana and how a barrage has sunk due to a faulty design. So to inspect the safety of this dam project, National Dam Safety Authority has carried out an inspection. So you should know what is the National Dam Safety Authority, what is its role and composition. Recently, to ensure dam safety in the country, a law was enacted by the Parliament. It is the Dam Safety Act of 2021. So under the Dam Safety Act, the Government of India has provided for surveillance, inspection, operation and maintenance of specified dams across the country. It covers any dam with a height of over 15 meters and between 10 and 15 meters. So all these dams come under the inspection and the authority of certain bodies that are set up through this particular law. So two specific bodies have been constituted under the law. You should know about both of them. There is a National Committee on Dam Safety, which is like a policy making body. This committee, which is a high level committee, it makes the regulations. It establishes the safety standards regarding dam safety. It comes out with the policies and it is implemented by the National Dam Safety Authority. Alright, this is the second body which has been set up. So there is a policy making body which is your National Committee on Dam Safety and a implementing body which is the National Dam Safety Authority. The authority not only implements the policies of the National Committee, but it also works with the state level dam safety organizations. At the state level, you have state dam safety organizations that are set up as per the provisions of the Dam Safety Act. According to the 2021 law, even state governments have established the state level dam safety organizations. So the National Dam Safety Authority coordinates with them, with the state authorities, and works out any issues between them. Now please make a note of the composition of these two bodies. The National Dam Safety Authority consists of a chairman and assisted by 5 members from different domains of expertise. They'll come from the domains of policy and research, the technical domain, regulatory domain, disaster resilience and administration and finance. So it will consist of 5 members leading the 5 wings and a chairman. It is headquartered in Delhi with regional officers being present. Whereas the National Committee on Dam Safety, the policy making body, it's a 22-member body headed by the Central Water Commission. The chairman of the Central Water Commission acts as the chairperson of the committee. Alright, the Central Water Commission is responsible for flood alerts in the country. It's the nodal agency for providing flood alerts. It's the nodal agency for dam safety in the country. It monitors water levels in the dams and major rivers across the country. So the chairman of the Central Water Commission becomes the chairperson of the National Committee on Dam Safety. So please remember the composition and the role and the functions of these two important bodies that are set up under the Dam Safety Act. They are very important for your prelims. Now moving on the same page, we have an article referring to a Zika virus outbreak in Karnataka, in the Chikballapur district. A cluster of cases are being tracked by the health department, the state health department, right? And this has raised concern in Karnataka. We have seen similar outbreaks happening in Gujarat, Rajasthan as well, in parts of Madhya Pradesh and Punjab. So India has seen a few outbreaks of the Zika virus, which is a deadly infection. Right? Around the world, we have seen few deadly cases come up. For example, in South America, Brazil in particular, has been very badly affected by Zika outbreaks. Even in the Pacific Island countries, deadly Zika outbreaks have been noticed in the past. So India also has seen few pockets of Zika outbreaks, and now a new outbreak has been noted in Karnataka. So let's understand what is the Zika virus. What is the Zika virus disease? The virus itself belongs to the Flaviviridae family of viruses, and it is a vector-borne disease spread by mosquitoes like malaria, dengue, chikungunya, etc. It's a vector-borne disease spread by mosquitoes, especially that of the Aedes variety. The infected Aedes mosquitoes, especially the female Aedes aegypti and the Aedes albopictus. They are the ones which mainly transmit the virus to human beings. The first case was detected in Uganda in Africa in 1947. So few African regions also have seen these outbreaks, and it spreads from humans to humans as well. Human to human transmission is also possible through sexual contact. When bodily fluids come in contact, right? When an infected person comes in sexual contact with another person, through blood transfusion, and from an infected pregnant mother to the fetus, to the child. These are the routes of human to human transmission. Now, once infected, many patients, they don't show any symptoms at all until the last stage. But in some cases, when symptoms do come up, you will find common symptoms like fever, headache, rashes, joint pain and severe body pain and muscular pain, and even conjunctivitis. These are some of the telltale signs of Zika virus disease infection. The incubation period is around 2 to 7 days. After you contract the virus, it will take anywhere between 2 to 7 days for the symptoms to appear. So that is the approximate incubation period of the virus. Now, this disease can progress into very severe stage. This is where the complications arise. It can lead to very, very serious consequences for pregnant women and the unborn child, because it can cause birth defects such as microcephaly, where neurological disorders are noted in the baby that will be born. Is that clear? It can lead to Guillain-Barré syndrome, the GBS, which is a notorious autoimmune disorder that leads to muscle weakness and even paralysis. You will lose your control over your motor abilities, your limbs, your hands and legs could become completely paralyzed due to muscle weakness and neurological dysfunction, which is a rare autoimmune disorder triggered by the Zika virus infection. And the worst part is there is no vaccine or no line of treatment, no specific line of treatment available, no drugs available to treat the disease, and no vaccine available. Right? Only the symptoms can be treated. Only symptomatic treatment can be provided. So that is why it is very important to prevent and contain the spread of the disease. by containing mosquitoes, by tackling mosquito breeding grounds, right, and by promoting healthier practices with regard to blood transfusion, sexual intercourse, etc., you can prevent and contain the spread of the Zika virus disease. All right, so please make a note of all these key points. Next, on page 12, we have an article related to India-Sri Lanka relations. India's finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, has paid an important visit to Sri Lanka and met with Sri Lanka's president, Ranil Wickremesinghe. So there are key points that summarizes the India-Sri Lanka relations here. I'll just take you through them, which is relevant for your prelims. As you know, Sri Lanka has been facing a massive economic crisis since last year. It faced a debt crisis. Its foreign debt had ballooned as Sri Lanka had borrowed heavily from countries like China, Japan and India, and also from the global markets, including from World Bank and IMF. So eventually, Sri Lanka could not serve these loans. It couldn't pay the debt and went into a debt burden. And overall, there was economic mismanagement, which affected its tourist inflow, its key exports like spices, rubber, etc. They were all compromised and the whole economy collapsed, leading to the bankruptcy of Sri Lanka. So since then, India has been the primary provider of assistance. As per the Sagar Doctrine of India, the security and growth for all in the region, through which we help all Indian Ocean countries to provide complete security, not just maritime security, but even economic security to the Indian Ocean countries. We've extended around $4 billion in aid and assistance over the last 1.5 years. We have given some aid as well, concessional loans. We have deferred some pending payments. So all such assistance has been given by India, and recently when Ranil Wickremesinghe visited India, several key agreements were signed for many new projects. Now India has promised full support to help rebuild the Sri Lankan economy. Right now Sri Lanka has taken help from the IMF. IMF has given one set of bailout package called the Extended Fund Facility. But to receive the second tranche of funding, the second batch of funding from IMF, Sri Lanka has to sort the loans which are pending with major creditors like China, Japan and India. These are the major creditors of Sri Lanka. It needs to work out a loan restructuring with these crediting nations, that is India, China and Japan. In this regard, India has said that we are more than willing to restructure the loans so that Sri Lanka will become eligible for the second batch of funding from IMF. To get the second bailout package from IMF, the existing loans with these crediting countries has to be sorted out. China is holding back. China is deliberately leveraging this and gaining a strategic advantage over over Sri Lanka. But India along with Japan have shown full interest to resolve this issue, to restructure the loans so that Sri Lanka can easily get more financial support from the IMF. Alright, so this support has been reiterated by the finance minister. Plus, India has provided $15 million as part of cultural soft power diplomacy to promote our Buddhist ties. As you know, Sri Lanka is a Buddhist majority country, right? So to link our Buddhist sites, to encourage Buddhist tourism as part of our Buddhist Circuit initiative, India has announced a package of $15 million. And along with that, we have reiterated our commitment to the new initiatives that were launched just a few months back when Sri Lankan President visited India. Ranil Wickremesinghe met with Prime Minister Modi and signed agreements for power grid connectivity to interconnect the power grids of India and Sri Lanka along with the other countries of the region. Right? This will solve the energy problem of Sri Lanka with regard to electricity supply. We have signed an agreement for improving civil aviation ties for more direct flights from Indian cities to Sri Lanka. We have signed power projects including a thermal power project, solar power project and wind power project. Indian companies are going to execute them. We are also looking to jointly explore oil and hydrocarbon potential near Mannar, in the Gulf of Mannar region. Right? So all these initiatives have been reviewed by the finance minister. These were signed recently. Then we are also negotiating a trade agreement. The economic and technology cooperation agreement is being negotiated to promote free movement of goods and technology between the two sides. So all these issues have been reviewed by the finance minister. Along with that, the finance minister participated in the NAM 200 celebrations. This is very, very important. The NAM 200 event was held in Sri Lanka to mark the entry of Indian laborers into Sri Lanka 200 years ago. 2 centuries ago, the British, they transported Indian Tamils under the brutal indentured labor system of the British, which was a replacement of the African slavery. As African slavery was abolished, right, the British Parliament abolished slavery in 1800s. So the British colonial enterprises like East India Company, they replaced African slavery with Indian indentured labor. It was a type of exploitative bonded labor system where Indians would be duped and tricked and dumped on British colonies around the world to work in their plantation crops, to look after their plantations, their factories, and provide cheap labor in their colonies. That's why you find such a strong Indian community in faraway countries even today. From West Indies to Fiji to Mauritius to Africa. The reason why you find a strong Indian community there today is because the previous generations, they were transported here by the British over the last 2 centuries as part of the indentured labor system. Similarly, Indian Tamils were transported to the Sri Lankan highlands, the central highlands, also called the Sri Lankan highlands, right? Which is very similar to our Western Ghats in terms of its topography, climate. It's very similar to our Western Ghats. So it is very suitable for plantation crops like spices, coffee, tea, rubber, right? This is something that is widely cultivated in the Sri Lankan highlands. So to look after these plantation crops, cheap Indian labor was transported by the British, and these Indian Tamils were settled. They are called Indian Tamils. They're also referred to as Malaya Tamils, as many of them have later migrated to Malaysia. Many of them have migrated to Malaysia and settled in Malaysia as well. They're also referred to as Malaya Tamils. This was the community that was initially discriminated in Sri Lanka starting from 1948. The Sinhala Buddhist majority, right? They started discriminating against the Tamil minorities, which eventually led to the civil war. So initial discrimination after Sri Lanka's independence began against the Indian Tamils, against the Malaya Tamils. Sri Lanka declared them as stateless, took away their citizenship. It said that these are Indian laborers who came recently under British rule. So it did not recognize them as Sri Lankan citizens and took away their citizenship, and that is what triggered the initial conflict between the Sinhala Buddhist majority and the Tamil minorities. So India has always cared about the well-being of the Tamil minorities, especially the Indian Tamils. Right? The other category of Tamils are Sri Lankan Tamils. They are primarily found in northern and eastern provinces of Sri Lanka. For example, in the Jaffna region, in the Trincomalee region, right? In the northern and eastern provinces, you find another category of Tamils called Sri Lankan Tamils. They have moved naturally. Over centuries, they have naturally migrated from southern parts of India towards Sri Lanka, and they were largely accepted in Sri Lankan society. But initially, Indian Tamils were rejected. And this led to the targeting of the whole Tamil minority, including the Sri Lankan Tamils later on. Alright, so Indian Tamils have been a focus for India. We've always looked after their well-being because even today they remain a backward community. As plantation laborers, they still suffer from poverty. They're still deprived of welfare. So India has built houses for them as well. We have taken up several housing projects to rehabilitate the Tamil community who are displaced by the civil war. And the Malaya Tamils, the Indian Tamils, are the biggest beneficiaries of these housing projects. Alright, so to commemorate the entry of these Indian laborers, NAM 200 event was held, and that is why the finance minister was invited. Alright, so India was represented by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, and she has reviewed all these initiatives that we have with Sri Lanka. Coming to the last article in today's paper, on the same page, we have an article referring to India-US relations. It gives you a sign of how India-US relations are improving. India is all set to open a new consulate in the United States at Seattle. I hope you know that Seattle is a technology hub. Many big companies, including Indian companies, have a major presence. There are several Indian students, workers who are based out of Seattle. So to provide better consular services, to improve trade, to improve investment opportunities, India has opened a new consulate at Seattle. This is a clear mark of improving ties between India and US. Because the diplomatic presence you have in each other's country is a clear sign of how strong the diplomatic ties are. and India has a massive diplomatic presence in the United States. Apart from the embassy we have in Washington, we also have consulates in Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, New York, and San Francisco, right? So now the 6th consulate is being opened, and the United States also will be expanding its diplomatic presence, because usually in diplomacy there is a parity that is maintained in terms of diplomatic presence. As per the Vienna Convention, both sides maintain a parity in terms of the number of consulates they have, the number of diplomatic officials they have deployed. So the US has an embassy in Delhi, along with consulates in Chennai, Hyderabad, Kolkata, and Mumbai. Now US is very interested to open 2 consulates in India, one in Bengaluru, which has been a long-standing demand, and the other one in Ahmedabad. So in the coming months, you will see new American consulates coming up in Bengaluru and Ahmedabad, along with the new Indian consulate in Seattle. So this is a clear sign of how the diplomatic relations are progressing, right? This announcement will be made at the upcoming 2+2 meeting, where India's foreign and defense ministers will meet with the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense from the United States. All right. So this is a very important update on the constant improvement that happens in the India-US relationship. So on this note, I would like to bring my discussion to an end. We've completed all the key articles from today's newspaper. I hope you guys have liked the discussion. If you did, do let me know in the comments. Do press the like button, and please take up these questions for your answer writing practice. So head to the Telegram channel right now. You have a quiz on some of these topics. The link for the Telegram channel is also provided in the description box below. So that is it from my side. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good weekend.